Today I'm going to show you how to make these amazing Elven circlets. Stay tuned. Greetings adventurers and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. As you can see, I am tanned and fresh from vacation, but I am ready to go on yet another trip because we are going to Conquest in Germany. I got a whole video about it right up here if you're interested. Anyways, somebody been sitting in this chair? Anyways, both Maddie and I are going to be running our own kind of camp space there, which we're super jazzed about. And since it is a LARP, we will be playing characters. Now the characters we're playing, Fox and Crow, are these like fey creatures, and we wanted to have costume pieces that made them look it. Originally we were gonna do like masks and stuff, but then we realized that wearing a mask through the entire thing, that'd be kind of a pain. So instead we thought it'd be fun to have like one of those Elven circlets like you see on Lord of the Rings or whatever. One of these things here. So that's today's episode. We're gonna pull it out from our brain and we're gonna make it real. This is way easier than it has any right to be. Check it out. All right, so without much further ado, let's just jump right into it and level up this skill. All right, for starters, we needed a plan. I'm not just gonna kind of willy-nilly fold up wires here like I was going to, but then Maddie made these drawings. It's better, that's better, yeah. The astute of you might notice that one of them is just the same turned upside down, which I thought was pretty clever. Not only that, but the smart little cookie there, I am the fox and she is a crow, and like the points of the crown look like fox ears, and then when you turn it upside down, they look like crow wings. I thought that was kind of nifty. Anyways, you're definitely gonna want to have a design. You'll see later on as I start trying to follow this pattern, it does get very intricate. All right, next, 4 materials. I'm gonna start with my little crown in case I mess it up. And to do that, I'm starting with this gold-colored aluminum wire here. The thick stuff is 12 gauge, and then this thinner stuff here is 24 gauge. I also end up getting 21 gauge. We'll talk about that when it comes to it, but just so you know, if you're making a list here in the front, 21 gauge as well. For Maddie's crown, I got exactly the same things, just in silver. Okay, so first things first, before I take that drawing and make it into something I could follow, I need to figure out exactly like how it's gonna fit on my dome. To do that, I need measurements. I basically want to figure out where the bottommost part of it would be and where the highest I would want it would be. For this, I just kind of eyeballed it with a ruler against my forehead and pulled out 4 inches. I then made marks on this long piece of newsprint here, measuring out that 4 inches and then cutting along my line. This basically gives me a Burger King style paper hat to work with. And just so you know, if you do not have a piece of paper that big, you technically don't need to do this. I really didn't need something that went all the way around my head. I just kind of wanted to like gauge it that way. But because I want this thing to be perfectly symmetrical, I'm only using half of that. So as long as you have something that goes from like here to the back of your head, which should be like 1 piece of paper, unless your head is giant. I say that. Hold on. Nope, doesn't go all the way around. Unless your head is absolutely average size, and that's perfectly fine. Anyways, like I said, I just fold this piece of paper in half and then hold it up against the center of my head right where I think it would go, so I can mark exactly how far along that kind of x-axis there I want the piece to go until it reaches like its zenith, its pointiest of points, if you will. This is just so I don't end up with like a tiny little point like right in the front of my head or them all the way back here, right? I want to make sure it's visually nice and flowing where I want it to flow. All right, with that mark, we're good to go. We know that point is gonna be the topmost, then the bottom of that little corner there is the bottommost. So this is the area I have to work with. There is one more parameter to these little crowns here though. If you look at the picture again, you're gonna see there's a jewel right in the middle of the forehead there. To fulfill that purpose, I went to my bone merchant who has all like cool gems and bones and such. Which, by the way, I now have a little baggie of bones to use for things. Everyone needs a bone merchant. But while there, I picked up this really pretty red jewel. 'Tis made of glass, because the other alternatives were like expensive. And also they're like natural products, they're made of stone. So it's hard to find something that would fit like perfectly where I wanted it. But because that is the centerpiece and everything kind of flows around it in the middle, that is part of our mathematics here, right? So I went ahead and plopped that down where it would go and just kind of drew a circle around it so I knew where it should be placed. Okay, so from here, we need to actually get like our design down onto this piece of paper. Now, if you have it like to scale in your program or something, you can go ahead and print this. It's not a big deal, but mine wasn't. In fact, a lot of times when Maddie does kind of the art piece of it, like it comes out looking great, but when you try to transpose that to the physical reality we occupy, some things don't go together that way, right? So it's really useful for me to kind of put it down first. To do this, I just kind of placed marks where I thought they'd go as guidelines, and then used rulers like this French curve here to make my lines nice and smooth. So it isn't so bad, I just continued using my reference photos, seeing how things laid on top of each other, making little adjustments here and there where I realized it kind of wouldn't work, including this little end design, which is the parts that'll go like right here. I realized, one, it needed a little bit more detail, a little more going on, and two, because I didn't want it to connect all the way to the back, I wanted to be able to size it as much as I wanted to. I needed there to be little loops in the back that I could hook like a chain to or a rope to or something. Happy with this general design, I just went back in and made little lines where I needed to wire wrap things in order to hold them together. So to make these crowns, I'm not gluing anything, we're not like pinning anything together or whatever. We're just using thinner wire and wrapping it around to hold everything together. Which again is why we needed to look at how the whole thing was put together, right? In the original drawing, there was a few like free-floating pieces that I could make there, but the way they crossed, it would just make that wrap kind of clumsy to me and hard to do. Going through and marking where these wraps would be and making sure they were just kind of straight lines. I'm sure like people who are good at wire wrapping would have no problems with them crossing. We're starting nice and easy with this one. So yeah, I made sure everything was just nice straight lines, really easy to do. Okay, now comes to actually bending the wire. Doing this is dead easy because this aluminum wire has no problem bending. All I did was lay the end of my wire down at one of the endings and then bent it into shape as I followed my image. Oh, this is an important point too. When I was kind of redesigning it, I made sure that all of the pieces are basically, there's two halves of this thing that are all just one continuous wire that's bent around. This is gonna help me in a couple ways. Again, it's less things to have to attach to each other, which is not only gonna make it less work, but it's gonna make the whole thing a lot more strong. But it also gives me like a really easy start and end point. I'm basically just following kind of a maze till its natural conclusion, right? There's no like tricky, make this little bit, end it, move it away, make another tricky little bit, remember where it goes. Like, no, it's gonna end up being two pieces, nice and easy. Now, wherever I got to a sharp corner, I went ahead and started that bend with my fingers, and then brought in some pliers to finish it. Now you're gonna see, I was experimenting a lot with this first go around. I didn't buy tools that were specifically for this, I'm just using pliers and whatever I have. I also used a ball peen hammer to really make those edges sharp. Though, I later learned that like a ball peen hammer, probably not the best. You want something that's a little bit more forgiving, it won't mar the metal as much. That's why I'm doing mine first. It still looks good, but you know, could be cleaner. Anywho, with those corners all in place, I've come all the way back around and hit the edge of my paper. Now remember, we want this symmetrical, right? So right where it hits the middle there is where we're going to start the other side. So I simply held right where that bend would end up, made my bend, and then flipped the whole thing over so I could re-follow those lines backwards. Doing this made it really easy to make sure this whole thing was perfectly symmetrical. And with the other side, I followed suit doing the exact same thing, just kind of following my lines all the way to the end. The only difference here being is around the edges here where I said like that band around my head would go. Rather than just kind of bending them around, I would actually twist them wherever these little holes would end up. Mostly because it looked cool, but it also added strength to those areas that are gonna be moving around a lot. And I don't know, I think that looks kinda slick. Again, once I'm done with this side, I just kind of flipped it over and did the exact same thing, just in reverse. And again, that leaves me with a perfectly symmetrical little piece here. I told you this was easy to do, you're just kind of following a thing on paper. Super nice. Okay, but it is really soft aluminum, so we need to start putting this whole thing together to help give it more structure. The first part I'm gonna do is this little opening right here in the smaller part of the crown. And for this, I'm using that 24 gauge wire. I just went ahead holding it nice and tight together into position and wound the wire around it about 15 or 20 times. Now, the YouTubes does say there is a technique to this thing, but let me tell you what, when you are filming something that small, it's partially why I hate doing like sewing on this show. Your camera wants to focus on everything but the thing that you're doing. It looks at your hand, it looks at your shirt, it just doesn't look at the thing. So while I was editing this, I realized you couldn't see that technique at all. So here is it writ large, with 2 giant sticks and some rope. It's dead simple though. All you're doing is making a few wraps around one of the things that you're trying to tie together. Then you throw in the other one and wrap both of them together as many loops as you want to go. Like I said, 15 or 20 or so. And then you finish it off by doing a few wraps around the other one. It's actually kind of fun to do something bigger like that because I didn't quite understand why that was the technique. But once I even just had it with rope, I couldn't pull them out from each other. Like they wouldn't slide out from each other. Those little wraps would bind it up and stop it from being able to move. I thought that was pretty slick. I like that. All right, so the next step is going to be combining the smaller piece there with that larger piece we made. To do that, we just kind of line it up exactly where we want and assess where those wraps are going to go. Then, just as I showed before, I put a few wraps around one of them, add the other one to the mix, wrap them both together, and then end it with those few finishing wraps. I just went through and did this everywhere that I thought it would add like structure or where pieces seemed to be just kind of floating free a little bit. And I think that looks pretty slick. Not only that, but it's actually really strong now. Still though, we can make it a little more strong, just a little more resilient against like bending out of shape whenever we move it around. And that is by doing some hardening to the wire. In order to harden the wire, you just gotta kinda hit it a little bit. I guess you could also harden wire ahead of time by like running it through some nylon tipped pliers a bunch of times. But barring that, I just kinda took my little hammer here and just tapped all over it. I'm not only hardening it while I do that, but anytime the wire kind of crosses each other, it's now making all of that wire like fit around each other. So rather than like lying just on top of each other, they now like conform to each other, which I like the look of. Obviously you do you, but I think that was neat. As one last bit in this whole like main body of the crown, you'll notice that like right in the middle, there's a diamond kind of shape with some points there. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I forgot about it. I forgot about it in the drawing, so I didn't add it in. But that's the nice thing about this whole technique is at any point in time, you can just twist up some more wire. As long as you can figure out how to connect it, it'll all work. So to do this, I just bent a length of wire in half and crimped it nice and tight. I then positioned it so that little fork catches on the bottom of my diamond here, wrapped those arms around the main bar of that circlet, and then twisted the ends together. This not only gives me this cool little extra addition that will frame my gem, but because I wrapped those arms around, it actually holds on a lot stronger. That middle stopped being at all kind of flimsy. And check out how cool this thing looks. There's always that moment where you're like winging a project, just trying to do a thing, and it kind of comes together, and you're like, that looks awesome. Oh, I didn't show it, by the way. To get the shape, I just kind of smashed it against my head. It is just aluminum, so I just shaped it where I thought it would go, and it stayed that way. That's nice stuff to work with. Okay, but now we have to figure out how to actually like make that gem stay. I will admit, this had me super stuck for a minute, but then I found this channel here by Nolan McClellan, I believe is his name. That goes over it perfectly, super clear. So I'm gonna leave that in the link below if you want more details. But as stated before, this is where that 21 gauge wire comes in handy. I just needed something that was a little bit more stable and strong than that 24 gauge. I also picked up these nifty flat-jawed pliers here. You hear people say all the time, like, get the right tool for the job. This is that. This is the right tool for doing all of this type of stuff. My regular pliers, they work great. They're fine, they totally work. But like, man, when I switched to it, things just got way easier. All right, but this is really cool. Look at how to seat a gem. Basically, I'm starting with two pieces at about 3.5 to 4 inches long. Putting my little flat pliers right in the middle, I bend two 90-degree angles around the jaws. Then I put the gem next to it to see how far they would have to come up in order to actually kind of hold on to the thing. Basically, we need little arms to come up past the gem and then be able to also do this thing to hold them in place. I just put my pliers where that little measurement would be and again bent them down to 90 degrees. I did this on both sides, trying to make sure they're as close to exactly the same height as possible. Happy with that, I continued those bends all the way down and then used these pliers to crimp them nice and tight. Just make sure you crimp them from both sides because as you like flatten it so that it's tight, it's gonna wanna warp on you. So you just gotta correct that as you go. Happy with the way that looked? I take the pliers and I hold this little arm here and then I bend those legs up again at a 90. I did that twice, giving me these two identical pieces here. Okay, this is how this works. It's really cool. Basically, you're gonna take the legs of one of those little pieces and put them between the goalposts of the other one there. You can see that now gives that a rail to kind of slide back and forth on. Now take the legs of that other one and bring them around to put them into the goalpost on the opposite side. This gives us this nifty little cradle with grabby claws on the side whenever you pull the ends. With that, all you gotta do is put your jewel in the middle and shrink it down till it touches the sides. Then you bend one of the legs to lock that into place. With that locked into place, you just gotta shore that up by taking each one of those legs and wrapping it around the goalpost it's touching. With that all twisted and secure, you now have this nifty little basket here. Last thing you gotta do is take each one of those little goalposts and turn them in so that they're facing where the sides of the gem will lay. Then just pop your gem into place and bend those little suckers over to hold it steady. And look at that, look at how cool that is. That looks just like the little thing that holds it like on a ring or something. It looks so professional. Oh, I love that. And you're left with these 4 little legs sticking out to the side. That means all we have to do is pop this into the middle of the crown where it goes and use those little legs to just kind of wrap around the crown and lock it into position. This was dead easy to do, and look at how clean this is. That is set, it's super strong, it fits custom to my noggin. Last thing we have to do is figure out how to keep it in place, so we need to add a chain from one side to the other in the back there. I picked up this nifty little rope chain just for the purpose. But there was an issue with that, because the rope chain, I didn't realize, like, it's real hard to get one of those little clippy, like, lobster claw things onto there. I don't know how to do it. But that led to something, I think, more interesting. I decided just to connect it to actually one end. In order to do that, I took my 24 gauge wire and just kind of ran it through the loop that I made and through the chain to make all these little links that hold it into place. I got like 6 links going in there. It's totally strong enough to hold. I'm good. Then I simply passed my chain through the other hole. Originally, I was then going to try to take that and figure out a way to like hook it up or like measure it to try to figure out how to make a little lobster claw. But I realized I really liked that extra chain that was hanging. I feel like that's something unique and could be said as part of our character's culture. I really like that. So to help facilitate that, I actually just wrapped another little piece of wire in the shape of a hook right on one of the little arms around my head. This way, I can go ahead and just rest it on top of that instead of like across my ear or something. Though as cool as this is, the chain was just a little bit too short. Like if I tried to drape it over my shoulder or something, it would kind of just fall back. So I needed to lengthen it just a little bit. And because I can't not add leather to a project, I decided to use some of this leather cordage here. All I did was use an awl to put a hole through it, and then I sewed some of my wire through that and through the chain. Once the wire was through both pieces, I just wrapped it around both of them nice and tight to form a really secure bond. At the other end, I did basically the same thing and included this really cool tooth that I got. We like that so much, we decided to make it part of like their culture where the more responsibilities you have, the more like chains you wear, the longer your chains are. And in our story, I had beaten this kind of foe or whatever, so I wanted to put this length of cordage that wasn't a chain, and then like a piece of them at the very end of it, to be like, you are so far down from things that concern me. It's just such a good little slap in the face. I really like this little extra thing we added. It adds so much more depth to the piece. It's really cool for me. So to do Maddie's piece, I did literally exactly the same thing, following the same exact drawing, bending it, which by the way, bending it with those little pliers, again, 1,000 times easier. It even made a more sharp bend just because like the nature of how those pliers are shaped all day long. But yeah, I wire wrapped them, I hardened it. The only difference is her stone that would go in the middle, the only one I could find that was the color she wanted, was this more kind of like heart-shaped one, which was hard for me because it didn't have like 4 corners to work with, right? I don't have things for that to like reach around and grab. I only have 3 sides to work with. So I kind of was winging it, but it totally worked out. I used the same exact technique, but this time I made one of them just like before, and the other side I made with only 1 tine sticking out. To make this work, just like before, I took the one with the 1 tine and put it through the little goalpost there. Then the one with the 2 tines, I actually crossed those legs around that single little goalpost. And I was happy to see this did the same kind of little grabby thing. So all I did was position the gem where it would go, locked it in by bending the legs, again twisted the legs around to lock everything really strongly in place. With a special note that the 2 crossing that 1 prong sticking up, I just wrapped both of those around once. I didn't want that to get too thick. Then just like before, I seated the gem in place and just locked it all where it would go. And that totally worked. I'm really jazzed that worked because I was stuck there for a second. Using these legs that are sticking out here, I just kind of position it into place with the crown, and again, lock them in with those loose wires. Now for Maddie's, we decided that, again, we like that chain so much, and her character's of higher birth, so she's gonna have more chain. So we wrapped the wire around the sides and added 2 hooks, 1 for either side. And then for her, I got this larger spool of chain. Basically, I just thread it through the holes and then back around through the holes to form this loop with chain hanging out on either side. Now she can just kind of pull it tight as she wants, drape it around those hooks, and then do whatever she wants with all that excess chain I left her. Maybe put like cool crow feathers hanging, rubbing other little charms. I'll let her figure that out. But look at how cool these things are. Like, even if this isn't something you're totally into, like making little crowns or whatever, you can use this for so many things. They came out so pretty, and I for sure have zero idea what I'm doing with this. This one, because I was just figuring it out, I think it took me like 3 hours to do, 3 or 4 hours. But once I had this one down, this one took me maybe an hour. Really fast to do once you got it down. They come out beautiful. I'm genuinely really happy with these. Look at it. Look how cool that is. Oh, I love it so much. I read somewhere if you wear it down lower, circlet. But you can wear it up higher, and because it's on this chain, I can tighten it, and then it's a crown. I am officially royalty. Though the glasses aren't doing me any favors here. So yeah, this is totally attainable and something you should totally try. It's so much fun. Why don't you tell me what you thought of this project in the comment section below? I'd love to hear like different design ideas you might have or different ways to make this cool. While you're down there, don't forget to give me some of that like it love and hit subscribe so you know when we release new content. All right, we're off to Conquest now. See you when we get back with Tales of Adventure. In the meantime though, keep leveling up, you. You made it to the end screen. YouTube loves it when you do that. It's a fantastic way to support this channel. Another fantastic way to support this channel is by joining these people's noble ranks. These are our Patreon members, and we cannot do this without them. And because of all of them, we have the money to make cool jewelry and leather things and all the stuff you guys like to watch. Special shout out to our newest high tier Patreon members, Brian McQuiston and friendly friend pal buddy Josh. A special shout out to our Grandmaster level Patreons, Andrew Smith, Froggy, Dragon Design, and Uri Sasharo. It means everything to us that you would support us in this way, and I can't express how happy we are that you like us enough to do that. If you enjoy what we do here, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description below. Otherwise, you can click on one of these videos that YouTube thinks you'd like, and that helps too. Now bow to me, for I am royalty. I shall be a just ruler. Everything is just for me.